Hi, everybody. Warm welcome back to Tea at the Ritz with Tricia. I've had a lovely long weekend, really enjoyed myself with some time off. Happily, for at least two of those days, the weather was absolutely beautiful. Not so good yesterday, and very definitely much colder today. So, weather's a bit weird, and I hope that's not affecting your mood too much. I know that the weather does affect our moods, and certainly it was beautiful on Friday and Saturday, and I felt very sunny and happy as a result. Um, I did a blog post yesterday which was all about the good things, surprisingly good things that have come out of lockdown. And I had a very nice comment which I thought I'd read out to you to start this today. It's from somebody called Jenny, and I think it sums up what a lot of people have been experiencing, at least I hope so. So Jenny wrote, "This has been a period of reflection for me. Without the continual rushing around trying to fit too much into each day, I found calm and peace in my environment. I had become stressed and anxious, not enjoying things that should have given me pleasure. Now I've had time to contemplate and analyse why I was doing them, and I realised that a lot of my time was taken up with useless pursuits. Where this will ultimately lead me, I'm not sure, but I do know that I'm a changed person. I can feel it. It is as if I've shed layers and am somehow free of things that burdened me. Strangely, I feel almost reborn, ready to embrace the future with a clearer vision. Being a super trooper has shown me that I'm not alone. We are all vulnerable to change, but I'm confident that we can move forward without fear into a new way of life." Now, I think that's absolutely brilliant, and what it gives me is a great deal of hope for the future, really, for the next stage of this terrible disease, but also for the longer term future, because I really do think that this has been an opportunity, a rare opportunity, to see things from a different perspective. And seeing things from a different perspective is kind of what I want to do in the video today. We've got new messaging from our government, which is moving from stay home to stay alert. Now, I don't know about you, but it feels that stay home is an extremely clear message, as much as you possibly can, go home and stay there. And I think we've got that message loud and clear, and most people have complied with it. Staying alert is very different because it's open to a lot of different kinds of interpretations. So I'm going to take this notion that we're not going to be given, or we haven't been given, such a very clear directive anymore, to see if we can make some greater sense of it for ourselves. I have mentioned this in last week's blog on Monday, I think it was, and it's about risk analysis and, in fact, how and what the variables are within that we need to consider when we are deciding what we're going to do, whether we're going to stay home, go outside, if we do go outside, what we're going to do when we get there, and so on. I think that human beings generally are incredibly bad at calculating relative risk. Not least because we often don't have the right information. We also have media that loves to play up all sorts of risks and all sorts of problems by dramatic headlines and so on and so forth. So if I asked you how dangerous flying was than going in a car, what's the relative difference between those two things that you might choose to do? I don't know about you, but my sense is that when I get in my own car and I'm, master of my own destiny, driving along, making my own calculations and decisions about speed and conditions and stuff, I'm very, very, very safe indeed. Whereas when I get on a plane, I'm putting my life, in a very vulnerable place because somebody else is going to be flying that plane, which I think is a very, very difficult and tricky thing to do. And I tend to see it as actually quite a dangerous activity. I'm always glad when I get there. I'm always glad when I land. I always feel that sense of relief, which I don't feel when I arrive after a car journey and drive up in front of somebody's house. Now, I don't know whether you know this, but there are 5 million fatal car accidents for every 20 aeroplane accidents. In fact, your chances of dying in a car are considerable relative to your chances of dying in a plane, which are vanishingly small. So I think of flying as a dangerous occupation. I think of car journeys as extremely safe, and I'm completely wrong. So I want to start with that because it absolutely illustrates what I'm talking about here. Now I've come up with I think 6 variables that I think we should have very clear in our minds before we decide to do anything over the coming months. Some of them will stay the same and some of them will be different according to the circumstances. So the first question I want to ask you, which is going to sound really stupid, but what is your fear? What is your fear about COVID-19? Is it A, that it will kill you? So that's the greatest fear of all. B, that you will get the virus and be ill, but recover. Or C, your greatest fear is that you're going to pass the virus on to somebody else, possibly somebody else in your household who is more vulnerable than you. Now, if your fear is of dying of COVID-19, I hope to illustrate that your chances of that happening are actually very, very small indeed. But obviously they are there. The chances of you getting the virus and being ill are very much greater than your chances of dying. And how ill you are when you get the virus is one of those completely random variables that nobody seems to be particularly able to predict. But it goes from no symptoms, 0 symptoms, to actually being extremely ill, as you know. And the passing the virus on is an important consideration because if you getting sick means that you put somebody much more vulnerable than you at risk, then obviously that is a very, very important fear. So those 3 questions sort of form the basis of what I'm just about to say. So these are the 6 variables which affect your risk profile. Now, to come up with these thoughts and ideas, I've been listening, reading, researching as much as I'm able to do. I'm not an epidemiologist, I'm not a scientist, I'm not a statistician, but I'm a reasonably intelligent human being, and because I can't always get the information that I need in the way that I want it, by listening very carefully to what people are saying, I've reached various conclusions which I hope will be useful to you. They may not, but I hope they may be. So my starting point here is that there are some very big variables for the person who is taking the risk, the you figure here. So who are you? And those variables are to do with whether you're male or female. Now we know that this disproportionately in terms of deaths affects men worse than women, to about 60-40. Social class, so this is a disease that is much more likely to kill you if you come from a lower socioeconomic group, which is probably because you have underlying comorbidities or other illnesses. Also, we know that people who have lower socioeconomic class tend to be live less long lives than people who are from a higher socioeconomic class. Your ethnicity, again, it's not known why. There are lots of theories about it, but it would appear that this disease disproportionately affects non-white people. And again, there may be genetic reasons for that. There may be all sorts of other reasons for that. We don't know. But again, who are you? Where would you put yourself in this, in terms of this group? And what is your health like? Have you had any major problems or disease or health issues in the recent past or in the past at all? So what's your risk factor from the point of view of your own health and also the health of the person that you live with? So how dangerous would it be to that person? Now, if you look at those variables, you can say, okay, so here I would say that I am at a moderate risk of this virus having a devastating effect on me, i.e. killing me. Or you might be very high risk within that group. Now, the second one is your circumstances, because again, this is going to have a big impact on you. Are you retired? Are you working from home? Are you going out to work? Or do you live with somebody who is either retired, working from home, or going out to work? Now, if you're retired, you have a lot of control over whether you go out or not, and also where you go. If you're working from home, the same thing applies. You're not going to be exposed to risk nearly as much as if you are going out to work. Now, if you're going out to work, the circumstances of where you're going to do your work will have a huge impact on how much risk you're running in terms of getting the virus, and then possibly taking that back home to other people who might be at risk as a result. So again, think about your circumstances. How exposed to the virus are you in your everyday circumstances? High, medium, low. Where you live is incredibly important in this. I heard a statistic yesterday morning on Andrew Marr. I think it was on Andrew Marr. It was on one of the programs I was listening to. And he asked the question about where in the country are you? Now, if you live in London, I think the statistics are that 86 in every 100,000 people in London have died of COVID-19. 86 in 100,000. That's how dangerous it is to live in London. In Norwich, which is in Norfolk, so much more rural area, but still a city, 5 in every 100,000 people have died of COVID-18. The difference, 86 and 5, London, Norwich, both cities, but the difference of risk if you live in one place or the other is phenomenally different. Do you live in London? Do you live in a London suburb? Less dangerous, but still higher risk than if you live in a suburb of another city. Do you live in a city other than London? Again, you're going to be at higher risk than if you live in a small town surrounded by countryside. Maybe you live in a very rural location. Maybe you live in a place which gets lots of visitors. Maybe you live in a place where there is currently a virus hotspot or low spot. So where you live is a consideration, and whether that puts you at greater or lesser risk. Clearly what I'm saying here is that if you live well away from London or any other conurbation in a low density population area with few visitors from the outside and surrounding areas, then your risk of contracting this disease is extremely low. And where are you going? So when you go outside of your front door, are you going to shops where there's good levels of social distancing and a lot of control, which is what I do, to a park to exercise? There is very little unlikely to be transmission of this virus out of doors. They're finding that more and more and more. So transmission of the virus in the street, in parks, is not very high. Are you going to another area by car? Are you going to another area by public transport? Are you going to visit a friend's house? Are you going to visit a family member? Will the other people around you be wearing masks, and will you be wearing masks? Now, these are all the variables that you've got to think about where you're going. If you're getting in your car to go to another area where there is more likely to be people with this virus with whom you might come in contact with, then obviously you'll have to give that far more consideration than if you're popping out to your local shops by walking in the open air, and then when you get there, there's not many people around. So all of these things are very, very important for you to think about. The next one is your behaviour and how that can influence whether you get infected or not. So wearing a mask and gloves looks like it might be a good idea. The thing is that nobody's proven that it's a bad idea, and it could be a good idea. So I tend to think that erring on the side of caution there, masks are probably a good idea for you if you're wearing them, and also if other people are wearing them. Your behaviour, again, not coughing or sneezing freely. If you do think you're going to be coughing and sneezing, then for goodness sake, take tissues with you and don't do that in the open air to spray virus around potentially into the air. That if you have symptoms, that you're really strict about not going out and then quarantining yourself, making sure that you keep yourself away from others in as much as you can. So again, being very, very responsible about things like that. Washing your hands regularly and frequently, cleaning all your surfaces with disinfectant. If you come out from a home that's clean, with clean hands, wearing a mask and going into an area which again has been disinfected and cleaned and is low, not many people around, you aren't nearly so much at risk yourself, nor are you putting others at risk. And finally, the virus. Now, this is the variable that we should all have more information about, I believe, and the only place we can get that information is from the government, and the only way they can get it is from testing and contact tracing. So what are the infection rates in the country? If you've got high infection rates, it's much, much more dangerous for you to go out than if your infection rate is well below 1. One other person gets infected by one person. What are the death rates in your country, in your area? We have relative up to other places, high death rates in this country. That makes living here and being here and going about our business here much more dangerous than those countries that have lower death rates. Are there any treatments that are actually working? This is information we need to hear, because if we are going to get this disease and it could kill us, but there is something that we can take that will, will either lessen the amount of illness that we have or ensure that we get better, that's an important thing to know. So within our community, is there lots of testing, lots of contact tracing going on, lots of compliance with testing and therefore isolating and so on and so forth? And what is the level of communication from the authorities in our country, and do we trust those communications? Because it's only if we are given as adults the kind of level of information that we need that we can make judgments about what is right for us. So I think we should ask the question, how scared should we be for ourselves in this situation, and depending on where we live, what we're about to do, and who we're likely to have contact with? Because I went out on Friday because I was having a day off, and I made a calculated risk about popping over to see my daughter and her family and 2 children for a cup of tea and a piece of Victoria sponge sandwich cake. And I calculated that if I went in my own car to a family that has been isolating solidly for about 8 weeks. They actually went into isolation 2 weeks before we were forced into isolation because Patrick had a slight temperature and a bit of a cough, one of my grandsons. They have been isolating. They've both been working from home. The children have not been to school. They've only gone out to parks for recreation and so on. They've had no friends around. They've had no contact with the outside world. I calculated that I was also fairly risk-free of having contracted the virus, that I was going to go in my car, go over there, have a cup of tea with them, sit outside to have that, chat for a while, get in my car and drive home. And I rated that as almost zero risk. Now, I could be wrong, and maybe right at this minute I'm incubating this dread disease, but I suspect I'm not. So that's the kind of thing that I think that we've all got to be aware of. And I'm going to finish today. I've got a poem for you. It's a beautiful poem. It's by Wordsworth, and it's on Westminster Bridge. And it was composed in 1802, and it's early in the morning, and Wordsworth is walking over Westminster Bridge, and the city is very still and there's nobody around. And I guess that's been the circumstances in London over the last few weeks. But it is a beautiful poem, and I think it's very true of this weekend in terms of everything around us. So it's earth has not anything to show more fair. Dull would he be of soul, who could pass by a sight so touching in its majesty. This city now doth, like a garment, wear the beauty of the morning. Silent, bare, ships, towers, domes, theatres, and temples lie open unto the fields and to the sky, all bright and glittering in the smokeless air. Never did sun more beautifully steep in his first splendour valley, rock, or hill. Ne'er saw I, never felt a calm so deep. The river glideth at his own sweet will. Dear God, the very houses seem asleep, and all that mighty heart is lying still. So beautiful poem, that one. So thank you very much for watching this, and I hope that was helpful to you in whatever way, shape or form it might be. And I shall very much look forward to seeing you tomorrow. I want to talk about skin this week. I thought I'd do a couple of videos all about skin care, skin condition, and all the things that affect that, in the hope that you'll be interested in it. So again, thank you for watching this, and I'll look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Bye-bye.